This is a 12mm f2.8 fisheye lens designed for full-frame DSLRs. This is a 12mm f2 lens designed for APS-C mirrorless cameras. It all gets a bit confusing, doesn't it? What's up everybody? In this video I want to straighten up the rather confusing topic of APS-C lenses versus full-frame lenses and what lenses can you use on what bodies and what difference does it make. Now obviously there's lots of different sensor sizes available. You've got APS-C and full frame, but you've also got micro four thirds and medium format and large format. We're not too worried about micro four thirds or medium and large format because generally the lenses for those cameras are designed specifically for those systems. Where the confusion generally comes in is between full frame and APS-C, because all the big manufacturers like Sony, Canon and Nikon all produce APS-C and full frame cameras all on the same sort of mounts, and it kind of confuses people. You know, can you use an APS-C lens on a full frame camera? Can you use a full frame lens on an APS-C camera? So today we're going to straighten all this out. All the different manufacturers have different mounts for different things. So Sony, for example, uses their A mount for DSLRs and the E mount for their mirrorless cameras. Canon uses the EF mount for their DSLRs and uses the EF-M and the RF for their mirrorless cameras, while Nikon use the F mount for their DSLRs and the Z mount for their mirrorless cameras. Now, what does all that mean? All we mean when we talk about mounts is the physical design of the mounting on the back of the lens. Now this is an EF-M mount lens. Now this lens is also available in Sony E-mount, and the only difference between this lens and the E-mount version is the design of this mount on the back, because the position of these bayonet mounts on the back are in the wrong place to fit on a Sony body. So what is the difference between a full frame lens and an APS-C lens? It all comes down to how big an image it needs to project out of the back. You see, full frame lenses are designed for full frame cameras, so they're designed to project the image big enough to cover a 35mm full frame sensor. Now, APS-C lenses are designed for APS-C sensors, which are smaller than full frame sensors. So the image that the lens needs to project doesn't need to be as big as the image that this projects. But there is a catch. Because it's projecting the image to cover a smaller sensor, it gives you a narrower field of view than the full frame equivalent. So both of these lenses are 12mm lenses. They physically have a focal length of 12mm. But all that means is the point of convergence, the point where all of the light entering the lens crosses over to be projected out the back, that point of convergence is 12mm away from the sensor. So both of these lenses have the same focal length, however, the angle of view that this produces is less than the angle that this produces. Now, can you mount a full frame lens onto an APS-C camera? Yes. What difference is it going to make? None. Because while a full frame lens projects a wider field of view than the same focal length APS-C lens, you are mounting it onto an APS-C camera, so even though the image is physically bigger, the sensor can't see it. So you end up seeing the same angle of view from a full frame lens on an APS-C body as you would with using an APS-C lens on an APS-C body. The main benefit of using a full frame lens on an APS-C body is to do with the image quality, because generally with lens design, the edges and the corners of a lens are its weakest point. That's where you generally get softness and chromatic aberrations and coma and distortion. So because the APS-C lens is designed only to project as big as an APS-C sensor, any chromatic aberrations, any loss of sharpness in the corners, the sensor is going to pick that up. With the full frame, however, it's projecting the image a lot bigger than what the sensor can see. So the sensor's only seeing that center portion of the image. So any defects in the corners, the sensor's not going to be able to see. But obviously that then means you've got a much bigger lens that you're not able to fully utilize. Now, can you use an APS-C lens on a full frame camera? For the most part, yes. If you are a Sony or a Nikon shooter, yes, you can. So a Sony E-mount APS-C lens will physically mount straight onto a Sony E-mount full frame camera. A Nikon F-mount APS-C lens or a DX lens will mount onto a full frame F-mount body. With Canon, however, it's a little bit trickier because Canon's DSLR lenses are split into two branches. EF denotes it is a full frame compatible lens, so will mount onto full frame or APS-C cameras. Their APS-C lenses, however, are denoted as EFS. These are still fundamentally EF mount lenses. The mount is the same. However, they've redesigned the lens so that there is an additional protruding element coming out of the back of the lens. And if you try mounting an EFS lens onto a Canon DSLR body, this rear protruding element crashes into the mirror mechanism in the camera, so it physically cannot fit onto the camera. Now, this is only a case with the genuine Canon APS-C lenses, the EFS lenses. If you buy a third-party APS-C EF lens, it doesn't have that rear protruding element, so the lens will physically then fit onto the Canon DSLRs. However, in any case, if you do use an APS-C lens that is capable of mounting onto your full-frame camera, one of two things is going to happen. Either A, the camera is going to recognize that it is a lens designed specifically for APS-C and is going to switch the camera into a crop mode. In crop mode, the camera only utilizes the center portion of the sensor, so isn't going to use the entire sensor like it normally would. It will only read an APS-C size section, so it's just like using an APS-C camera, with the slight downfall that you obviously get a drop in resolution. So if you have a 24 megapixel full frame camera but you use it in a crop mode, you're only going to be seeing around about a 10 megapixel file. If your camera doesn't automatically switch to crop mode, or you've turned this feature off, the camera will still utilize the full area of the sensor. However, it's only going to have an APS-C size image projected onto it. This is normally going to result in either some very strong vignetting or in some cases a complete black circle around your camera. There are certain APS-C lenses at certain focal lengths can project an image big enough to cover a full frame sensor with very little vignetting, so you could get away with using the whole sensor. Using adapters doesn't really change anything either. So if you're using a full frame mirrorless camera and you put an adapter in place, you can then use both full frame and APS-C DSLR lenses on a full frame or APS-C mirrorless camera. So in summary, a full frame lens will work on a full frame or APS-C camera of that type, or you can use the relevant adapters to allow you to adapt it onto a mirrorless camera. An APS-C lens in most cases will fit onto a full frame camera, but it will either then introduce a crop mode that puts you back into an APS-C format, or you get some very heavy vignetting. Any questions or queries, comment box is down below. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.